You know, when empires rise and fall, their stonies aren't just found in dusty old history books. They're literally written on the skyline. And in India, as the Mughal Empire began to fade, a whole new story was built in stone, brick, and marble by European powers. So let's dive in and see how these buildings tell an incredible tale of clashing ambitions.
So, how exactly is history written in stone? Well, it turns out every single arch, every dome, and every pillar has a story to tell. A story of ambition, power, and cultural exchange. We're going to see how 3 different European powers left their unique mark on India, each with a completely different vision of what their empire should look like.
First up, the Portuguese. Now, as the first major European power to arrive on the scene, they didn't just set up a few trading posts here and there. Oh no. They built entire fortified towns right along the coastline, creating this powerful chain that was a clear statement of their presence, visible from miles out at sea. Talk about making an entrance.
The Portuguese brought a very specific style with them, Baroque. And this wasn't just about building something functional, it was all about making a statement. Think over-the-top, theatrical, super dramatic, and incredibly detailed. It was all designed to project the immense power and authority of the church.
A perfect example of this is the SCCESS Cathedral in Goa. I mean, just look at that grand facade. It's a crystal clear example of the Iberian style they brought over. Along with other stunning structures like the Balm Jesus Basilica, these buildings were like little pieces of Europe that had been transplanted right onto Indian soil.
All right, let's switch gears and turn to the French, who had a completely different philosophy. While the Portuguese were all about those religious theatrics, the French, well, they were obsessed with something else entirely: logic and order.
This really puts the two styles in sharp contrast, doesn't it? On one side, you have the Portuguese Baroque with all its drama and decoration. On the other, French rationalism. They planned their cities, like Pondicherry and Chandernagore, with almost scientific precision, using straight lines and right angles to create a deep sense of order. It was really a battle of ideas played out in city design.
Now take a look at the Church of the Sacred Heart of Jesus in Puducherry. It's still imposing, for sure, but you can spot the difference right away. There's a clear structure, a real symmetry to it. It's powerful, but with much less of the elaborate ornamentation you'd see in Goa. This was all part of their idea of anonymous architecture, buildings that were meant to be functional and clean, rather than individually expressive.
And that brings us to the British. As they became the dominant power in the region, they didn't just impose their style. No, they created something entirely new, a kind of hybrid architectural language that would go on to define an entire era, the British Raj.
This new style was called Indo-Gothic, or sometimes you'll hear it called Indo-Saracenic. Now, this wasn't just Gothic architecture that happened to be built in India. It was a very conscious fusion of European Gothic arches with traditional Indian domes and even Persian details. It was a deliberate attempt to create a unique visual identity for their empire.
You can almost read these buildings just by looking at their features. For starters, they were massive, incredibly elaborate structures. But they had thinner walls thanks to some clever British engineering using materials like steel and iron. You'll see those classic pointed Gothic arches, but they're paired with huge windows, which were absolutely perfect for the Indian climate. It was a true synthesis of styles.
And here are 2 of the most iconic examples of that style you'll ever see. We've got the Victoria Memorial in Kolkata and the Gateway of India in Mumbai. You can totally see the European forms, but then they're crowned with these beautiful Indian-style domes and motifs. This is really the climax of that architectural fusion, a true meeting of East and West in stone.
This table really shows the difference in philosophy pretty clearly. The British used local materials like red sandstone to fuse their Gothic style with Indian themes. The Portuguese, on the other hand, tended to use brick and wood to import their Western forms almost exactly as they were back home. 2 totally different ways of thinking.
But the story doesn't stop there. In 1911, the British made a monumental decision to move the capital of their empire from Calcutta to a brand new, purpose-built city, New Delhi. And of course, a new capital demanded a new, even grander style of architecture. This new style was Neo-Roman, and it was less about fusion and more about the direct imposition of classical Western power. This was architecture designed not just to impress, but to completely awe and even intimidate.
So what did this style look like? Well, the buildings were often described as anonymous, without a lot of individual ornamentation. It was kind of a congested mix of styles that put a big emphasis on these grand circular structures. And a really unique feature to look for is the upturned dome, a shallow dome that became a signature of this new imperial capital.
And this right here is the ultimate symbol of that era, the Rashtrapati Bhavan in New Delhi. Designed by Lutyens and Baker, it is grand, classical, and just plain imposing. If you look closely at the very top, you can see that signature upturned dome, a perfect symbol of this final phase of British imperial architecture.
The ambition behind this entire project was perfectly captured by the phrase, the Rome of Hindustan. Think about that. They weren't just building a new capital city, they were trying to build a new eternal city that would be the very heart of their empire.
So, from the theatrical churches of Goa to the ordered streets of Pondicherry and the grand fusion of Mumbai, it's clear that buildings are so much more than just shelter. They are storytellers. Which leaves us with a final thought. What stories do the buildings around you tell? What history is written in the stone of your own skyline?